Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Nicholas Snow Show. And I'm your host. I wonder who I am. Oh, I'm Nicholas Snow. And this is going out live on Thursday, October 13th at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And it is just after National Coming Out Day, October 11th. So I hope you took your next step. My pronouns are he, him, and his. In this conversation that I'm having with my guest today, you're going to learn why it's important that we use our pronouns. And frankly, I really should introduce all of my shows with my pronouns. And last season, I was remembering to do that. This season, I haven't been. I'm telling on myself. And it is very appropriate and important for me to do that, especially in this episode, when I welcome Celia Sandhya Daniels, an entrepreneur, motivational speaker, blogger, composer, musician, photographer, hiker, and filmmaker. She currently resides in Southern California with her family. She identifies as, she's Asian Indian who identifies as gender non-binary trans femme. And she has made a reputation for herself redefining diversity under a talk entitled From the Bathroom to the Boardroom. And you have to admit that is a very catchy title. As a community advocate, Celia brings an intersectional blend of ethnicity, creativity, religion, and corporate experience in her trans evangelism, as she likes to call it. She offers freelance consulting for small to large sized companies and volunteers for a few nonprofit organizations, churches, institutions, and community resource groups in the United States and India. She is passionate about supporting marginalized communities and individuals by providing them a safe space to address various issues related to bullying, gender discrimination, medical, behavioral, mental health, and suicidal ideation. Celia is currently focused on writing policies, education, and building allies with local communities, businesses, churches, police departments, therapists, doctors, and organizations that fight for civil rights and economic empowerment. So clearly, there'll be a lot to talk about with Celia in the show today, coming up in just a few minutes. First, I'd love for all of you to know how to watch the Palm Springs Pride Parade worldwide right here on PromoHomo.TV.
I have found a place out of time and space, far from city life, up on greater heights. And I'm flying alone now. And nothing is holding me down now. I'm flying alone now. And nothing is holding me down now. I have found a place out of time and space, far from city lights, up on greater heights.
So at the website, PromoHomo.TV, you'll find that parade broadcast graphic. Click into it, and you'll find a link to the YouTube broadcast, and you can use the Notify Me feature and watch the Pride Parade live on Sunday, November 6th at 9:50 a.m. Pacific time. That's Pacific Standard Time, because the night before is when we fall back. And I'll be back with my special guest right after this. And without further delay, let me welcome to the show my very special guest, Celia Sandhya Daniels. Welcome to the show. Oh, here we go. Hi.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Nicholas. It's just amazing to see the graphics for the Palm parade. Um, I was there last month, I think, for one of the events, and I'm so happy to see that say gay. People keep
Yes.
saying gay. It's so important right now. Coming out is not just enough, but we need to start proclaiming who we are. I love the way you put the graphics together. It just empowers me to be a part of the show. And thank you for inviting me. It's such a great evening today.
Well, I first became aware of you over a year ago, and I wanted to have you on the show at that time. And
Mm.
then I ended up needing to have a surgery and was going to be in recovery at the time
Yeah.
you were booked on the show. But the surgery went well. All right, for anyone that wants to know, hernia repair. Okay, my hernia
Mhm.
repair went well, and I'm doing well. So, you know, I'm guilty of projecting stereotypes onto people. I'm a human being, so I put people in the boxes that I would were was taught that people go in,
Mhm.
and so in owning that, one of the stereotypes that I would project about you, having grown up in India,
Mhm.
was that you were a part of, for example, that you were Hindi or that you were Buddhist. But the reality is, you grew up in a conservative Christian family in
Mhm.
India.
What are the odds?
Well, precisely. And in your bio, you
Mhm.
say, your bio, growing up as a lonely, closeted trans child in a conservative middle class Christian home in southern India.
Mhm.
You've come to write and speak passionately about your own mental health journey, gender dysphoria, and the social challenges that you faced in your family, work, school, and community in both the US and India. And I make some money from PromoHomo.TV, but now I'm working a full-time temporary position to help fund this. And even when I was pursuing that as a cis white male living in a society that was built to support me, it was
Mhm.
challenging for me to find a job.
Mhm.
Well, you add to those challenges all the intersectionalities of which you represent and the people that you fight for represent, and it's a much different story.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I think a lot of people need to hear about the trans community in India. And as you rightly said, I belong to the 6% of the Indian community that is who are Christians. And growing up in a conservative Christian family and growing up with my dad was a Hindu and he became a Christian. Later part, much earlier in his life, he became a Christian. And growing up in a evangelical kind of society too, it was interesting for me to be a part of the church where you were always taught, this is right, this is wrong. It's always law. There's no love in it. And I was kind of caught up in that, and I was always having this question as to, does God know that He created me like this? And is He just playing around with a person like me and saying that, okay, I created you this way, but you're going to struggle and go to hell? No, I don't think so. I think people started misinterpreting Bible the way they wanted. And growing up in a household, especially with me and my brother, very patriarchal in the early 70s, my gender wasn't doing justice to my anatomy. I knew I was different since I was 4 years old. I told my mom that I wanted to be a girl, and that's the only way I could express at the time. And I did wear my cousin sister's clothes, and I was running around the house. But just fast forward to my fourth grade, I was abused by one of my uncle, and I thought probably he abused me because I am like a very feminine looking boy, and I didn't know the answer for that at the time. But 2 years later, my cousin molested me, and this is the time when it hit me that, Oh my God. I'm sorry. I want to give a trigger warning to the people who are watching. I forgot to give the trigger warning, but I just want to mention that a lot of people within our community, especially within LGBTQ community, we don't have great stories. It's not because we are struggling, it's because the society is struggling to accept us. And that's what I was going through, and I didn't know how to talk about it. I went through layers and layers of trauma, one with abuse, one boy having gender dysphoria, another one, the Christian church is telling me go to hell. And I
For
grew
many
up.
different reasons, they were telling you we're going to hell.
Exactly. So I think I grew up in all these traumas, and the breaking point was in my ninth grade when I went outside in India. In the early 70s, if a hijra person goes out, people usually throw or beat them up. They treat them as the scums of the society. And I remember I'm wearing a dress, and I walked out in my ninth grade. It was an evening time, and a security guard near a construction site, he caught hold of me, and he started yelling, and there were close to 20 people who came, and they started screaming and using all kinds of derogatory language. I was there standing in a dress and staring at them, thinking, why are these adults yelling at me? I'm just an 11-year-old child, and why are they doing this to me? And don't they have any kind of empathy or compassion? And at the time, I only saw hate. And that hate just stuck in my mind so deeply that even after 45 years of struggle, sometimes we see the hate in the eyes of people, in pulse that happened, in all the struggles that we went through in so many areas, especially as an LGBTQ community in US. We have seen those kind of struggles. And that was the day I started thinking about maybe I should not live. And I contemplated suicide and thinking about all kinds of things,
When you were
self-harm.
12.
When I was 12, yeah, it was really hard. And I and that's the time I started living in denial, and I was afraid to live, and I was also afraid to die. You kind of live in this virtual space where you don't know what you're doing because your life is it's not meaningful because you don't know what to do with your life, and you're struggling with your identity. At the same time, you're trying to cope up with pretending like everything is normal to your friends and your community and your family. And I went through that. It was a struggle. Coming out was, it's such an apt time when we celebrated the coming out day, National Coming Out Day. To me, and I think for all of us in the LGBTQ community, we come out every day to somebody in the world. It's not a one day thing, but we celebrate that day, but we always and every day we come out to somebody in the world. Could be just a waiter, a janitor, or somebody who's a CEO of a company, or a nurse, or a doctor, or a priest, or somebody. We just come out. And that's always been our lives. And being in a Gen X generation, I can relate to a lot of this coming out, and it was a struggle. But my life slowly started changing, and once I got married, I thought probably my gender dysphoria would go away. And I was an executive in a multinational firm doing consulting across the globe.
Did you get married in a did you fall in love, or this I'm projecting another
Yeah,
stereotype onto Indian families? Did your family choose your spouse for you?
they
So
recommend it. It's like eHarmony. They'll just say, "Hey, there's somebody there. You want to check it out? You
well,
want to check
that
it out?"
seems like that's nice of parents. I respect that. It's when
Yeah.
you have no choice and you're saying,
Oh
"All right,
no,
this
no,
is who
they.
you're marrying."
Yeah. So just to for the audience, I think I wanted to make sure that they understood my gender identity. I identify as gender non-binary, but I was still attracted. I'm still attracted to women. And that's one of the reasons why I was attracted, and I'm still attracted to my wife, even after 25 years of our marriage. That girl that I saw that day in 1997, that's the same girl. I've been married for 25 years. And I saw her, it was an arranged marriage. My parents recommended and said, you can chat with her and see how it goes. And we just instantly fell in love with each other because we had so much in common. And I was attracted to her, and she was attracted to me, and we started our lives, and that's the time I had to come to US to work with Dun and Bradstreet. I was working on some of the key initiatives in India, and they had called me to start some initiative in New York. And I came to New York in 97, and it went down the spiral just 1 year after we got married because I didn't know what to do. My gender dysphoria came back again, and I wanted to be here. I am trying to be a husband to my wife, and then we had a child too. My daughter is lying this side, my wife is here, and I'm here in between, struggling to be a dad and husband. And inside, I'm Celia, and outside, I'm a entrepreneur. I was a business executive. I was doing a lot, but people go through these struggles, and it was really hard for me at the time.
I want to continue your story, but I want to backtrack a little bit as
Sure, sure.
well. Also, I don't want to wait till the end of the show to point out your website and the important corporate work that you're doing now.
Mhm.
And I'm just going to briefly show your website on the screen so people can see it. Just one
Absolutely.
second. I'm going to do that right now because I'm the director, the producer, the host. I'm doing it all at the same time.
No worries. I
All
can
right.
keep
So
talking. Yeah.
that is the website Rebicon.com. By the way, what does Rebicon mean?
It's interesting. My daughter's name is Rebecca.
Okay.
So I named the company after her, and I added a con to it. It's like it's consulting. So I added a little bit of an IT touch to it. It's calling Rebecca Consulting. So
Oh,
that's how the whole name evolved.
well, that's wonderful, and also, this is a live show, and I want to also acknowledge um, one of my viewers who watches all of my shows. Christian Ortega says hola, and muchas gracias, amigo. But someone we both know is Paulina Angel,
Oh
who's
yeah, I
a
love
trans
Paulina. Yeah.
activist. She says aloha, Sir Nicholas, and my fabulous sister Celia. The question I wanted to go back to, because I know that when people first learn this or they hear it about you talking about being a woman who came out as trans but fell in love with a woman and you've been married for 25 years and still madly in love with her, people don't understand the distinction between gender identity and sexual orientation. And I
Mhm.
was wondering if you would share a little bit from your perspective about that.
Absolutely. So, gender identity is basically you identify in one gender and it's in your head. It's how you identify as. And sexual orientation is based on whom you're attracted to. And, sometimes in a very funny way, people say that sexual orientation is between your legs and gender identity is between your ears. So, it's in your head. And that's one way to remember gender identity and sexual orientation.
I get your point, but some people also will say that your biggest sex organ is your brain. When they talk about
Mhm.
sort of
Mhm.
what attracts people, but I understand what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Um, the other thing I the other thing that I really want one of the things I was thinking about, and I've heard people within the trans community discuss the advantages or disadvantages of whether or not they pass. And what that means
Mhm.
is, can a can a trans woman show up in the world as a cisgender woman and not be outed as trans based
Mhm.
upon their appearance? And I was reflecting on this conversation as I've heard it, and wouldn't you say that the ideal world would be that it had no impact whatsoever about how someone appeared, that they just could simply declare who they know themselves to be in the process of communicating the world around you,
Mhm.
and whether or not you look a certain way becomes inconsequential?
Absolutely. I have, especially when I've been in the US for probably, I mean, it's 25 years now. And when I first came out, I was identified either as a cross-dresser or a transsexual. I'm talking about early 2000. And that's what I knew at the time. And
That's how
that's
you
how
described yourself?
I was called a cross-dresser.
Okay.
because I did not medically transition. So if you medically transition, you're a
You mean
transsexual.
so the term at the time, as it would apply to someone in your situation,
Was
was
cross-dressing.
cross-dresser.
Right. Because when you socially transition, and there's a lot of transition. People transition various ways. One is personal transition, medical transition, social transition, and also legal transition. And some of them I cannot medically transition because I have other issues. I have heart problems. I just went through a cardiac arrest last year, and I'm here sitting and speaking to you. So it was interesting, and I went through so much in my life, and I feel like I need to take care of myself. And a lot of blood clots and a lot of medical issues can happen, especially with hormones within my body. And I respect people who can transition. But going back to the point of passing, I always challenge people with something very interesting. I tell them that, is passing important to you, or presenting yourself is important to you? Passing is, yeah, I mean, she looks like a girl and I just pass by. I'm not really presenting anything to you. But when I present myself to someone, or present myself in the society, or even in the community, I feel like I want them to know who I am. My identity is so important that I want them to know that trans people like me exist, and we are walking among them. I am in the office along with them. I don't want to pass. Many times people say, you look like a woman. Why do you have to even say that you're transgender? And to me, I respect women to the point of saying that I don't identify as a woman, I'm a trans woman. And to me, that identity is so important. And I remember going for an interview with Verizon, and the HR lady looked at me and she said, "Hey, I looked at your resume. It looks great. I'm going to pass it on. And by the way, you look like a woman. Why do you want to mention in your resume as you're a trans?" And I said, I am a trans woman, and I want to be hired as a trans woman and not as a woman. And she said, "Honey, don't even say that. You look fine. You look great. Don't worry about it." I
Which
said,
is very
"No,
offensive, right?
I
In
know."
some
I was
ways.
like, "No, I am a trans woman and I want to be hired as a trans woman." And she was not able to comprehend that because she was trying to fit me in these boxes. Even though trans people come out a certain way, we always want to put people in boxes. And that's what they were trying to do. You pass, then you are probably this way. If you don't pass, you're probably this way. Um, I respect people with different gender identities now, and the younger generation, Gen Zs and millennials, are changing the way gender identity is coming out. They're just showing us, people like me, who are Gen X and probably the baby boomers, even pronouns. Why is it so important? And I learned from that. And after that, I found that, oh my God, there's so much that I don't know. And I'm learning every day. I don't claim that I know, but I believe it's important for us to present ourselves no matter how we look. We don't want to pass in this world. We want to be present, and we want to present ourselves in a nice manner that the world would learn from us.
Precisely. In my interviews, and I've
Mm,
done many with members of the trans community, and I always try to identify my own ignorance. And if I have questions, I like to ask them. And if I feel like I need to pull my own covers, I do.
mhm,
But one of the truths I feel like I've uncovered is that gender identity comes down to who someone knows and declares themselves to be. It isn't related to appearance. It isn't related to
mhm,
sexual orientation. And and when I think about pronouns, it's like I remember I was in yeah, I've been an activist for decades, but I was in some sort of Zoom meeting with someone, and I asked someone in the chat, when is it appropriate to use your pronouns when you introduce yourself? And the answer was always.
mhm.
And and so one of the ways I've explained this to my friends is, so you don't know someone's pronouns by how they appear in the world.
Mhm.
You have no way of knowing how they identify or how they want to
Absolutely.
be known. The only way you can know is if they tell you. And the only
Exactly.
and the only way you can honor someone is if if you ask. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. Pronouns is how I identify myself and how you identify me, and also how you respect me by identifying and showing that this is my identity, and you do that. And also, the important thing about pronouns is pronouns are a way where we show that this is our identity and it's part of our who we are. And it's important for me to identify in the pronouns because sometimes I feel like a person might look different and we assume this is what it is. But we should never assume. You always need to ask. You want to approach a trans person this way. If you meet a trans person, let's say in subway or in any mall, you want to walk up to them and say, "Hey, my name is Nicholas. I go by he and him pronouns. How about you?" That also indicates that you're an ally and you really understand how to respect another person. And that's the way I would approach it. And I learned that also. And sometimes growing up in a British colonial, um, background that we are in India, to me, they them did not make sense too. I was struggling with it for a long time as to how can I use they for a singular. And then I started reading some of the background behind they and them, and it's been used since the 13th century. And 13th century, Canterbury Tales, Agatha Christie, Shakespeare, all of them have used pronouns that they in their novels, and it is to represent a community or even a killer. For Agatha Christie, he said that the killer could be they because everybody assumes in those days that the killer was always male and not female. So it was always a twist. And I learned it in a nice, interesting way. And I started talking about it. And we need to be convinced about who we are. And that really helped me to talk a little bit. And I also do a lot of workshops on pronouns and help people. It's not just gender diverse, but also to address a culturally diverse person like Ashley. Ashley can be he, him, or she, her. Sometimes they don't even know. And if Ashley introduces saying that, hey, my name is Ashley, I go by she and him, her pronouns, then we know that this Ashley is she. And same thing with Bo or Anupam in India. We don't even know what gender are we talking to in the virtual world right now. So pronouns are not just limited to the gender diverse community. It is basically for the culturally diverse community and also for unisex names and people who are allies who want to be supportive. So I believe that pronouns has a lot more meaning to just the gender diverse community too. Mhm.
Well, thank you. You actually provided more information than I've ever uncovered in one of my interviews around pronouns
Mhm.
with a member of the trans community. So on your website, you say, I have to make it wider so I can read it. Yes. We
Mhm.
help all organizations to respond to industry transitions in order to stay relevant and competitive. Our
Mhm.
years of experience have taught us to focus on your employee empowerment when you make your business success our priority. And of course, you have wonderful areas of your website, including policies and guidelines. You have a
Mhm.
variety of topics that you discuss.
Mhm.
Meaningful inclusion starts from bathroom to the boardroom. Meaningful allyship with the medical community. At the intersection of neurodiversity and gender diversity,
Mhm.
transcending patriarchy in our workplace. So
Mhm.
many, and then lots of information on diversity and inclusion, and many different resources and links to TGI resources and organizations. And one of the things that just jumps out is the very first resource you list is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And I
Mhm.
think this would be a great time for you to discuss some of the powerful and even heartbreaking stats that
Right.
are out there as they relate to the trans community.
Absolutely. I think if you take 2019, there were probably 27 trans women who were murdered in US and Puerto Rico. The number went up to almost 47 to 50 last year in 2021. And it kind of doubled to the point of people not being sensitive to the trans community. And I faced that kind of an issue when 2:30 a.m. in Long Beach, and I could have been one of the victims. And I didn't realize that sitting in my car, I had another stranger next to me, and I was so stupid to take him to his parking lot, and he was making advances to me. And that night, I realized that if he found out who I am, or if he had some kind of aversion towards trans women, he could have done a lot to me that day. There are a lot of women who have never come out alive, and that's why I share my story. Even in Trans Vagina Diaries, I have my story about how that night made a difference in my life.
You mean
There are
trans vagina monologues?
monologue, yes, we are doing
Trans,
one.
so that you did a trans vagina monologue.
I did a Trans Vagina monologues, and I'm doing a Trans Vagina monologues on November 5th and 6th in West Hollywood, along with a group of trans folks in West Hollywood. It's a part of the West Hollywood team. We are
So if you're
planning
not at Palm Springs Pride, or if you can be at two places at once, you'll want to know about that event in West Hollywood.
in LA. Yeah, I would love to
I,
come to Palm Springs if I'm able to, but I have to perform on both days.
I understand. Right. So I don't think that will work. I was referring to my audience.
I know. Yeah.
Yes. Wow. All right. So you've stayed on longer than I usually would have my show, but as I mentioned, we don't have to end, and we should take advantage of this opportunity to have this really powerful conversation. So, one of the things I'd like to accomplish in the home stretch is I would like you to revisit what it was like to create a modern family and your transition into being sitting across from someone at Verizon who really clearly needed who you would be in the future as a consultant to corporate America. So that's our character arch that we're, our
Mm-hmm.
arc our character arc. So take us back to that that first year of your marriage, and your wife and your daughter are there, and you're having this crisis again. How did that evolve into this modern family?
I came out to my wife 4 years after my marriage, and when I first came out, she said, "You need help," and I spoke to a therapist who was a Christian counselor, and he told me I was a feminine gay. And I told her I am not attracted to men. I am not sure why I fall into that category. And a couple of years later, there was a doctor who told me that I look like a woman and I should have surgery and I should transition. And to me, I wanted to do my own research, having a scientific background, working in the healthcare industry. To me, it was important to, this is my body and I am responsible for what I do to my body. And that's when I started exploring as to what's going to happen. And there was a time when I came out to my daughter. She was 12 years old. My wife was very apprehensive about it. And she said, I don't know how our daughter's going to take this. And,
Where were
she
you
loved,
living? What city at the time?
oh, this was in Thousand Oaks, right here, right
Okay.
here. Yeah. I came out to her and she accepted me in 25 minutes.
What year was this?
This was sometime in when she was 12 years old. So I have to back calculate, probably like 2011 or so, 2011 or 2012.
Well, trans issues, I would say, were not at the forefront of cultural dialogue or even among her peer groups. So good on
Mhm.
her for being so quickly accepting.
Yeah, and she was accepting. My wife took 17 years to accept me. The reason is we come from a different background, Asian background, where trans people are not revered. They were revered in the past and after the British colonialism, they were completely cast away. And so it became very difficult for my wife to accept her husband as a trans person was completely out of the picture. And she tried her best to help me understand, try to get some help. And I tried my best not to be who I am. Can you imagine? I just tried to do everything possible not to be a trans person. And the more I tried, I found when I started peeling the onions, the layers of the onions, I found Celia inside that onion. And that was so true that I couldn't hide who I was. And after my wife started accepting me, it became very different. And she became an advocate for me. We welcome trans people from various parts of the world. They come and stay with us. Even next week, I have a person from India who's visiting us. And our family started being more supportive. And my wife started being more vocal, even in the church, that we go to. And
Are
my
you
daughter
still
started.
involved in the Christian
Oh
church?
yeah, yeah. I'm still faith is important to me. I'm trying to help them understand, though it's challenging. To me, I believe that what Jesus had talked about is much different from what people talk about it from the pulpit. So it's very interesting for me to really take the stand in even in my faith. We do that, and we also advocate. My daughter's a big. She's one of the delegates for California Democrats, and she's a young delegate, and she is canvassing and doing a lot for the LGBTQ community. And it's so amazing to see my daughter, blossom, and now she's 22 years, and she moved to Chicago Northwestern for her master's degree, and she immediately started a campaign with her professor for for another campaign, for the Democratic campaign. And that's in our blood. What we teach our children is so important for us. And to me, I want to be a good human being. Being trans is not my only agenda in life. And I always tell people that I want to be a good parent. I want to be a good spouse to my wife and a good human being in the society. And that's what is so important for us to be caring about people who are different, understanding them and listening to them, going an extra mile and processing it and trying to help them. That's what changed me. I started as a trans right advocate, and I ended up as a human rights activist. So people in my community, they have given me awards not for being trans, but for a human rights activist. And to me, that made so much of a difference. So my allies are a lot of the straight people. A lot of my friends are in the gay community in Ventura, and I really love them to death. And I'm now learning a lot of the terminologies, and it's so fun when we call each other bitch or something. I just don't bother. Just even yesterday, we were just chatting, and it was so fun. It was so fun. There's so much of life in our community. People don't understand. We are just caught up in so many things. We just need to lighten up and just enjoy the moment with our friends. And so I really love the way you've just framed everything together. And thank you for all these questions. Yeah, they're really great questions.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I have a couple more questions. So
Oh yeah.
Lance says thank you. He's a wonderful supporter of PromoHomo.TV.
Oh yeah.
He
Thank you,
says
Len.
thank you for another great show, wonderful topic full of knowledge, which gives me the opportunity to let my viewers know that you can support PromoHomo.TV for as
Mm.
little as $10 a month. The content is free across social media platforms, but if you want to help empower me to do shows like this, you can go to patreon.com/promohomotv if you would like. And I've been talking about the important work that you've been doing, Celia, but I would also like for you to explain specifically how this evolved into the really important work that you're doing for corporate
Absolutely.
America.
Absolutely. So I was a businessman, a brown businessman, very privileged, working for consulting for Fortune 100 companies. Some of the big
Not even
global,
500, Fortune 100 girl.
absolutely, yeah, some of the top five consulting firms like Capgemini. I also worked with the clinical research company called Quintiles. Now it's called IQVIA. I worked in a lot of these companies. My P&L was close to 250 million, and I managed a team of around 800 people across the globe. Now, I was very privileged in what I did, and I was proud about it. But deep inside, after every presentation with my client, I would come back to my hotel room and I would just wear a dress and sit down and cry. That deep it was. The hate was so deep, and my gender dysphoria was so deep that I didn't know what to do. And I decided to come out. And after I came out, I thought California is much more open. There are lots of companies where the corporate equality index is 100%, and they would love to have a trans entrepreneur who is a part of their executive team. And I was a senior executive in some of these companies, just three levels below the CEO. And there was a time when I came to this point where I applied for almost 30 to 50 companies in LA, and including a lot of companies that flies the rainbow flag across during the Pride Month. And none of them wanted to hire me because they said, we want to hire you, but we don't know how to hire you because you are a senior person. If I transitioned and came out in a company that I was working, that would have been easier. So I quit my job and I started looking for a job where I can be Celia. and it was really hard for me to find. So after 1 year of struggle, my finances were going down, my savings was going down, and I didn't know what to do. I was going desperate, and I just said, okay, I'm going to take Celia out and I'm going to try to see how the world is if I try to apply back as Daniel. In 1 month, I had 3 interviews, no questions asked. Companies like Accenture just called me and said, we know who you are as Daniel, just come and join us on Monday. And I could not join because I was struggling with and I said, I cannot join these companies as Daniel and I have to be Celia. And when I tried, they couldn't hire me. Probably people of color or trans person who's an immigrant in this country. Sometimes you're so marginalized that even within our own community, sometimes you're marginalized. And I felt like I had to do something about it. And I started my own company. And that's how Rubicon evolved. And I started my own company and I said, I'm going to be my own CEO. And I'm going to go back to the companies where I lived and I spoke as Daniel. And I started consulting with them. I have 23 years of experience in working with the payers, providers, and pharmaceutical industries. Today, I'm consulting for a $26 billion biopharmaceutical for diversity in clinical trials to help the trans community, how diversity can be brought even in the clinical trials for the trans community. That's the path I went through. It wasn't easy, but I kept at it. I kept at it and I kept pushing myself. And there were times when I felt so discouraged. I felt like I couldn't do it. And I almost felt like giving up. But I think there's a lot of change, and there are a few good people in these companies that really understands the value that we bring to the table, and not just our identity, but the whole package, the professionalism that we bring to the workplace. And that's what is the result of Rubicon. And I've never been happier in my life. And I've been consulting and consulting for so many companies now. And I will consult. I will continue to do that. Be an advocate of the community. That's my mission in life.
So you've said you've been well. You have such a beautiful story. You've said you've been married for 25 years, but it took
Mhm.
your wife 17
17 years.
years to accept you, which means you basically have had 7 years of a really supportive,
Mhm.
vibrant, thriving, inclusive modern family.
Mhm. Absolutely. It's so funny. Sometimes people ask me, "Are you married to a guy?" Or, and I tell them, "No. Why do you assume that? Just because I'm trans, it doesn't mean I'm married to a guy." And one thing they ask me also, "Do you have kids? Can you have kids, by the way?" And I tell them, "Yeah, I have a 22-year-old daughter, and that's my family." And they can't believe it.
Um,
They're changing all
I,
this.
I have friends that are public about this. They've been on my show, I think. But
Mhm.
anyway, their names are Laura and Annie. And
Mhm.
Laura was born. Laura was born Laura, but Laura didn't know it at the time. So
Exactly.
anyway, Laura was before coming out as trans, was a fighter pilot in the military,
Wow.
and they had kids. And anyway, they're still together today as woman and woman, and
Mm.
having a spectacular, wonderful life. And I just love it. So, my personal mission statement is to honor and express my creativity in a way that makes a difference. And the
Mm.
underlying sort of editorial goal of PromoHomo.TV is connecting the circuitry of humanity by creating programming for LGBTQ plus everyone. And I was inspired to do what I do by learning about the sanctity of life in the early 80s by people that were dying of HIV and AIDS.
Yeah.
And periodically in my work, and I'm leading up to a compliment for you, I have this sort of conversation with someone that I thought, wow, if this was pulled out of my entire life as an example of what I accomplished in my life, I would be fine if this was the example. And I'm referring to our conversation in this episode tonight because I believe that the story that you've told, the journey you've lived, and my role in capturing it in this powerful human interchange is just something that could forever create positive good for the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really thank you for what you're doing. And it's definitely empowering when we share our stories and when you provide the platform for voices like mine, not just being trans, but intersectional identities that I carry. It just goes across the globe. People in India, if they're watching this episode, they will understand that they have hope. That even if the children are born as trans, they will understand that, wow, there is hope for us. And that's what we give from these shows. And that's what we are probably promoting in the show. There is hope for us. And not just empathy, but empowerment as well.
Well, you and I are not more than a little bit more than 100 miles from each other. So let's make it happen that we get to meet in the real world. I'm sorry I missed you when you were here for Cinema Diverse. I was probably home broadcasting.
No worries.
But I really appreciate you being on the show tonight.
Thank you, Nicholas. I really appreciate what you're doing. And thank you so much. And for the listeners and for the people who are watching us, thank you so much for this time. And we really want to send our love to you all.
Yeah, well said. And still, if you hang tight, I'll speak with you briefly after the show. For
Absolutely.
everyone else watching, I'll see you next time.